John Tamny right now, the Real Clear Markets editor, FreedomWorks Center for Economic Freedom director. You know, John, if you don't mind, I want to pick up on what Aisha was saying there, that, you know, not everyone is reading from the same choir book within the Republican Party. There are some in the Freedom Caucus and elsewhere to the right of the general party, even with the rightward shift of the party, who will put the pressure on a Kevin McCarthy or anyone else who entertains that leadership role to steer quite a conservative path. What do you make of that?
Thank goodness for that. The more that we can shift the Republicans into a stance of actually trying to reduce the burden of government, they'll be doing what Republicans are sent to Washington to do. Conversely, if they move into more of this centrist notion of getting along to get along, they're basically going to drive themselves out of the majority that they work so hard to get.
So kind of don't repeat the sins of the Tories in Britain, right? Because they started diluting tax cuts, pulling the latest tax cut package. Liz Truss will soon be a former prime minister as a result. But now they're talking about tax increases. They're not all that different from Labor.
Yeah, it's staggering. Look, if the Republicans are not cutting taxes, their minds are wandering, and they're invariably doing things that they shouldn't be doing. When you can reduce the burden of taxation, the penalty of going to work, and most of all, when you can reduce it on those who produce the most wealth, you naturally produce the most amount of economic growth and freedom, because the rich, by virtue of being rich, have unspent wealth that they have no choice but to put to work. That works in England, that works in the United States, it works anywhere it's tried. How could the Tories be so foolish as to side with basically Labor on keeping the tax rate high?
You know, it's kind of weird, right, John? If you look at the environment in which we live now, there is a push to stimulate economies, but don't stimulate them too much, right? Because every act you take will be deemed to be inflationary. And in a weird way, that's what undid Liz Truss, right? Her tax cuts were kind of equated with spending that could actually boost economic activity, weird as it sounds, and welcome as it would sound, because it would put further inflationary pressures. And I'm wondering if the markets then come into play as they punished her and could conceivably punish Republicans if they try to do the same. What do you think?
Well, you know, at risk of insulting you, these arguments were made back in the 1970s. That's how lame-brained foolish they are. This notion that economic growth, that people prospering and working and creating new businesses could actually cause inflation is so backwards and so counter to what actually happens. So you wouldn't
be raising rates in this environment, right?
To me, raising rates is a non sequitur. For one, the notion that the Fed can put up a stoplight to credit into the United States ignores how credit reaches productivity. But secondly, if you want to beat inflation, it's about having a stable currency. Inflation's a currency phenomenon. The idea that you do it with the plan in place to put people out of work and shrink an investment is so backwards to how you get prices down in the first place. And so it's mistaken in England, it's mistaken in the United States, and at what point do Tories act like Tories? And much the same, at what point will Republicans act like Republicans and once again say, we are brought here to reduce the burden of work, reduce the flow of dollars to Washington? That wouldn't scare markets. That's what would cheer markets. Investors want to back countries that are actually growing, not those that are growing Washington.
Do you think that it's just a snapshot in time here, the Dow up about 544 points on the notion that maybe rate hikes in the future won't be so big or even so many? Do you buy that?
Oh, no. The idea that the Fed can prop up markets with its rate fiddling vis-a-vis banks that are increasingly irrelevant to total global credit just defies basic common sense. If the Fed could prop up or shrink markets, our economy would be so wrecked right now that it wouldn't be worth discussing. The simple truth is the Fed's not that important. It never has been. The reason we attract so much investment in the United States has nothing to do with the central bank. And let's stop pretending that central planning failed in all other ways, but it works from the Federal Reserve.
All right, I'm just going to take a leap here, John, and just put you down as a maybe on the Federal Reserve. But we'll watch it very, very closely. Good seeing you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, John.